Good morning, everyone. Can the panelists turn on their videos? Are you able to do so? Perfect. Just checking, making sure everything's working. And if you are an attendee from a state agency, if you could just put your agency title next to your name, and that'll make it easier for me to click on you when it's time for a report. Thank you. So you change your name by going to the probably the three dots next to your profile, and then you click on rename. I'm not sure if there's something different if you're not a panelist, but we will do the best we can. Thank you everyone for your patience. Oh, I'm seeing now that it's something I have to do on my end. So never mind, folks. You're good. Don't do anything. Sorry about that.
There we go. Hey, folks. I'm sure everyone had trouble, like I did, trying to get into this meeting, but we're all here. Good morning, everyone. If we could just do a quick round of introductions, that'd be great. Happy spring. Nice to see you all again after a really busy legislative session. If we just do a quick round of intros, folks can say your name, organization, where you're at, and I don't know, what's your favorite dessert? Let's do that. So, hi, folks. How he, him, his, down here in the Southern Willamette Valley in Eugene. I work for OJTA, and I would say my favorite dessert is probably cheesecake. Any kind of cheesecake with a little bit of like, fruit topping, strawberries in the summer, or blueberries, raspberries. I'm a big fan of. So, a slice of cheesecake and a little bit of coffee, and I'm a happy guy. So now I'll pass it to Quinn.
Good morning. My name is Quinn Reed. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm the Oregon Policy Director for the Center for Biological Diversity. I live in Portland, and I think anything with lemon, a lemon tart, that just says spring and summer to me. And I will pass it off to Valentin.
Yeah, thank you. Valentin Sanchez, pronouns he, him, él. I work with the Oregon Law Center's Farm Market Program. And I guess ice cream, every time I travel to Oaxaca and visit my parents, I, do the, what is it called? Nieve de leche quemada. So it's got that, milk, burned milk, tasty in it. I love it. And I'll pass it over to Bob.
Good morning, Robert Collin, retired, pronouns are he, him. My favorite dessert is wild strawberries in the field. But so the cows like that too, so I'm usually with them when I have that. Welcome everyone, it's a beautiful day in the springtime. I'm gonna pass it off to Huey.
Good morning, everyone. Huey, he, him, Executive Director of OPPO Environmental Justice Oregon. Favorite dessert, I would say, would be the pandan cake. It's a green cake, usually associated with birthdays or celebrations, and it's not what we say in the Chinese culture, not too sweet. So pass it off to Duncan or Ben.
Either one. Thanks, Huey. Good morning, Ben Duncan. Portland, Oregon, Chief Diversity and Equity Officer at Multnomah County, representing Oregon Commission on Black Affairs. I think my favorite dessert is probably bourbon, but in the spirit of keeping along with everybody else, chocolate cake with a glass of milk is my favorite food-based dessert. Pass it to Jim.
Jim Kreider, he, him, from lovely La Grande, Oregon, where we had another night of 3 inches of snow. It just is not giving up. It's not going away. It's getting old. But in the spirit of snow and coldness, chocolate ice cream with chocolate chips is what does the deal for this boy. brings it home every night, and it grows a nice belly and lets you sleep well. Thanks.
And I think that's all UTF members with Amira and Courtney. If y'all want to go, that'd be great.
Sure.
This is Courtney Linebaugh. I'm the assistant in the Natural Resources office in the governor's office. And my favorite dessert is homemade chocolate chip cookies.
My name is Amira Streeter. I'm the Natural Resources Policy Advisor to the Governor and Staff Liaison to the Environmental Justice Task Force. My favorite dessert is probably cheesecake as well, but preferably strawberry or cherry cheesecake. She, her pronouns.
Thanks, Amira. And thanks for the reminder, pronouns. Okay. All right, gang, it is 9:14. I think we have some agency updates. Just a quick review for today. We got agency updates till around 11:15. So hopefully the agencies have an opportunity to update us. And then any EJ-related legislative issues that agencies are tracking, will be the time for us to hear from them. And then, of course, at 11:15, we'll have an opportunity for Nargess from the Oregon Law Center to come and talk to us about agricultural worker safety and health. And hopefully we'll have some time to do some closing remarks. I'd like to, sometime around 11:15, if folks are okay with it, do a little 5-minute break for folks to get up and stretch. So hopefully after we have agency, before Nargess goes and right after agency updates, we'll have a little 5-minute break for folks to get up and stretch and not get blood clots. So that would be great, right? And then for tomorrow, we've got more stuff to do, but that's our agenda for today. Any revisions or anything else that I'm missing? Are folks okay with that? Okay, perfect. Well, in that case, let's go ahead and jump right in. So I know we've got a couple agencies on the line. Looks like we'll have agriculture go first. I think we have Christina Higbee, if you're on the line. Want to go ahead and start us off? Hey, Christina, if you would share with us your favorite dessert, we would like to know as well.
Yes. Hi, good morning, everybody. I was thinking about this. I love super dark chocolate with a hint of chili and then a nice hot cup of coffee with it. That's one of my favorite things to do.
Thank you.
Christina Higbee, ODA, she, her, hers. And real quick, legislative updates. Sorry, I have my young daughter in here. Okay, thank you. Let's see. 2021 legislative session, governor recommended budget and ODA bills. I'm just going to highlight a few things. Let me close this. Let's see. The governor had put $1 million grant in creating diversity in our ag market access program. So we're really excited about that and what the possibilities that will bring to producers here in Oregon. Policy option package I want to highlight. We have emergency management coordinator on the line, an agency equity officer. That will be really great if we can get that. We also have a baseline soil health assessment money to be able to do that. We've been hoping to get a position to kind of assess the soil here in ODA to help folks out better. And then another really good thing related to EJ is we're getting funding hopefully for the continuation of Klamath water quality work that we have been doing with our farmers in that area and working with the tribes as well. Legislative bills, we're following a lot. I don't have any one specific, but if any folks have any questions related to that, I'll try and do my best. One thing I want to highlight is our market access program. We're doing right now some research. We're trying to reach out to small and mid-sized businesses associated with the production and sales of food and beverages. focusing on BIPOC and women-owned businesses. We want to create a virtual roadmap that will be able to be online and connect business ventures to services to enhance and grow their businesses. Before it's usually like who you know to be able to get the services that you want. And this we're hoping will be able to really help out those smaller businesses and be able to access those services to really enhance the business that they want to grow. That's what I have for that. The natural resource program areas, I'll focus on CAFO, Easter Day Farms Dairy LLC, is something that's been in the news a lot. 1 second, I'm going to close the door. Sorry. Spring break, the kids are up. In the news, there's been a lawsuit against the Easter Day Farm people who own it. We are aware of the lawsuit against the owner and other businesses based in Washington and their bankruptcy proceedings. We are still in a draft permit. It has not gone out for public comment. We're really happy about that because of this issue that's going on. And we are doing our due diligence and just waiting and looking at the, how the bankruptcy proceedings are going before we do anything. So it's on hold until we get more information to be able to, if we're even going to take it to public comment. Does anybody have any questions related to that? No? Okay. Let's see. Another thing I want to mention, we do have an upcoming confined animal feeding operation advisory committee that's on April 8th. I can send anyone that's interested a link to where you can get that information if you're interested in participating in that. They'll talk about CAFOs that are going on. I'll be doing an update of the work that I do related to outreach and education, and be happy if any of you all want to participate in that. The other thing I want to mention is pesticides. We just completed the Pesticide Analytical and Response Center, completed our 2017-19 biannual legislative report. It might be interesting to some of you folks. I'll be happy to email you a link to that so you guys can look at it. And if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to help out. And then finally, chlorpyrifos. There is a new training out for non-certified mixers and loaders, and that is in Spanish. And so we're really happy about that they were able to create some Spanish language to help those folks that do use that particular pesticide. And I can also follow up with a link if people are interested. I think that's all I have on my end. If anybody has any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Monty.
I do have just one quick question. Going back to the training on the use of chlorpyrifos, is that training? Could you tell us more about the training? Is it a 1-hour training, video, written materials? Just want to know more about it.
Super great question. I apologize. I did not get into details of that, but I can follow up with you by email to give you all of those details. Does that sound good?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have one quick question. I'm really excited to hear about that program for, trying to get resources to BIPOC business owners. I guess I'm just curious, like, if you could tell us a little bit more about the program, its staffing, like, does it have adequate sort of budgeting and or is it something that you all just kind of are like, you know what, let's try this out?
So are you speaking specifically to the $1 million that are in our budget, or to the new program that we're trying to do? The
program we're trying to get off the ground, yeah.
Okay, so right now it's just in the development phase. What we're doing is our next phase is to reach out to as many people as we can to kind of assess what it is we have here in Oregon. And then be able to take those resources, pull them up and put them on our website so people can connect to each other. One of my main things is to try and reach out to our tribal partners and any kind of tribal members that would be interested in that. And then hopefully reach out to you guys to kind of help me connect to people that you may know that we can include in this process. We're going to be sending out a survey to help with that effort in identifying the resources out there. And then, you know, it is a work in progress, so, you know, it'll be slow in the beginning, but we want to reach out to as many people as possible. So I'm hoping I can use you guys as a great resource to identify those individuals in Oregon, and then hopefully that the word can be spread out and we can get as many people as we can to be connected.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Christina? Perfect. Great. Well, thank you. Okay, up next here is Superintendent Daryl Tukufu from the Education Department. I don't know if you're on, Daryl. Don't see him on this list.
Well, Amira just posted, we should skip Daryl in the chat.
Got it. Thanks, Ben. Let's go to DQ. I think Nina or someone else. Stephanie, yes. Whenever you're ready, Stephanie.
Thank you and good morning, task force members, Chair Boa, and my name is Stephanie Caldera. I serve as the Environmental Justice Coordinator for Oregon DEQ. Looks like folks can hear me okay, so fantastic. Very briefly, you know, Christina mentioned a couple of things. Obviously, DEQ as a partner in the CAFO program is also watching the Easter Day Farms events as they are moving forward. So working in collaboration with our partners over at AG. And then largely, I did not submit a written report for this meeting. Much of the work that's going on is sort of just continued work in progress by DEQ staff, and as well just sort of tracking at the legislative level. Obviously, the bill that does concern the task force and the creation of the Office of Environmental Justice that comes from Governor Brown. So that's something we as an agency, you know, remain tracking quite closely. And then just to note, so DEQ will present its budget to the Joint Ways and Means Committee the first week of April. As I understand, it will be Monday the 5th, and then Wednesday the 7th will be the 2 days for agency presentation. And I believe that committee starts at 8 a.m. So bright and early on a Monday morning. And then I believe there will be a third day for sort of the public testimony in response to the agency budget information. I believe that is scheduled for Monday, April 12th. Those dates may change, obviously, based on the committee's needs, but that's what we know right now. So my director, Richard Whitman, and possibly a member of my Environmental Quality Commission, either Chair Kathleen George or Vice Chair Sam Barrasso, may participate in those. And then just a functional note to our commission, they will meet on this Thursday and Friday, the afternoon of Thursday, and then roughly the morning of Friday for their next regular meeting. There's a whole host of things on the agenda. If folks have questions, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's really what I bring today for updates.
Any questions from task force members?
I have one, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time for it, but given the bill about the Environmental Justice Task Force kind of potentially moving into or under the agency, are there any updates on that process or any things we can do to support, help, clear the way? And again, I don't know if that's an item for later on or if that's something we should discuss now.
Well, if I may, as a staffer at a state agency, we state agencies have no official position on any bills. And I do know, I believe that Mira has some updates, general legislative updates that will be on the agenda later. So I would politely defer to Amira on those matters for the bill.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to get it out there since we
Yep.
were at that stage. So,
Absolutely, but I fully appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you, Stephanie.
I just had a quick question, Stephanie. I wonder if you could update us on the permit for Northwest Metals, if you all have any updates about that.
Sure. Let me pull open in the director's report, which is a report that Richard presents to our Director Whitman presents to our commission at the meetings. There is a short update, and I do believe that currently staff are working under both a court injunction timeline and our own permitting process timelines. So the very brief background for those who aren't familiar, Northwest Metals is an auto salvage dismantler, effectively. They had been in the Northeast Portland Cully neighborhood, suffered a catastrophic fire occurred at their property just over 2 years ago now. And because of that, there are a number of cleanup things that needed to happen, some court mandated requirements related to permitting, and some other items just generally to ensure that sort of level of toxic air pollution didn't happen again. And I have now pulled open the update and I'm looking at it. And if anyone is interested in seeing this directly, it is on the Environmental Quality Commission's meeting webpage for later this week. It's in the director's report, and I can put a link in the chat to that webpage. As part of the court injunction, which is effectively helping to enforce elements of the permits. Right now, I believe DEQ is in the process of evaluating and making a decision on that final application for that permit. There was a public comment period that was extended, and I believe it expired or closed in early February. So that is actually one of the reasons that I believe Nina DiConcini, my counterpart for EJ here at DEQ, is not here today. She's working with her staff. I believe the court injunction requires DEQ to take some action by, I want to say, the 25th. And I can double check that. I apologize, don't have the details in front of me. So staff are working on that. I don't have a sort of permit decision announcement one way or the other at this time, but I think we will be seeing that in the next couple of days to comply with those court orders as well.
Stephanie, if you can give us an update, that'd be great.
Absolutely, thank you.
Bob?
Good morning, Stephanie. Thank you. The broader issue is with repeat offenders and chronic offenders, and the underscores the lack of enforcement, the lack of regulatory authority. I think there's a bill on this right now, but it happens to EJ communities. It isn't a single offense that pollutes the whole air. It's the whole range of factors that do. So a chronic offender, and it's not in the legislation, but a chronic offender should include all the permit violations for all their businesses, not just their air permit or what other permits you have. So I'd like to know what the chronic offender status is, how do you get it, and what it really covers in terms of offenses. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And just very briefly, I appreciate you bringing up the bill. I've neglected to mention that. So there is a bill that would, I think the best way to characterize it is strengthen potential authorities for the consideration of past violations. When
You're talking about 3372?
Yes, I believe that's the number. That would allow DEQ effectively a little bit more stringent authority related to considering past violations. So your comments are well taken, and I know in addition to the bill, which we remain tracking and keeping an eye on, DEQ staff are looking into that same thing in our current authorities as well. So I hope to have an update on that soon for you all as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate it. All right, gang, let's go ahead and move on to Fire Marshal update. I don't know if Mr. Hefner is with us today. I don't see him on the list. Okay, let's go on to Fish and Wildlife.
Well, good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Very good. I can see you, but I can't see myself. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm hooked up here. Well, yeah, good morning. I'm Kurt Melcher. I'm the director of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, he, him pronouns. And I'll I'll throw my dessert out there, and I'll keep with my good friend Ben Duncan's theme. I'm going with the Kentucky Derby pie, which, if y'all have ever had it, is pretty fantastic and does include a little bourbon, only for flavoring. There's no alcohol, it's all cooked out, but nonetheless, really glad to be here and see you all again. And as you all know, I've been the agency's citizen advocate since the beginning in 2008. So good to see the good professor and Ben again, as well as others. I'll be relatively brief here. I have a few items to update you on, and then happy to answer any questions. We, in the legislative process, I would just highlight that our governor's requested budget does include a diversity, equity, and inclusion position for the first time at ODFW, and we're real excited about that and hoping we can continue to push that through the process. We will not be up in the Ways and Means Subcommittee until late April. So we're still a ways out, but real excited about that position. Also, just as a side note, really excited personally, at least to see the EJ issues moving forward legislatively as well. And congratulations and best wishes to you all on that as well. I would mention that I think I probably updated you all, maybe it was late last year, but our commission did adopt a climate adaptation and ocean change policy, which we're the first fish and wildlife agency in the nation that has adopted such a policy to really help provide overarching guidelines and guidance to the staff and the department as we move forward. We're part of that, and it's a multifaceted policy, but one of the things that we committed to in that policy was to do a carbon footprint assessment of the agency's operations. And so we have just very recently gone through the contracting process, and if not yet, very soon we'll be hiring a contractor to do that assessment for us, or with us, I should say. And then I think you all asked for information about our work on inclusion issues and equity issues. And I would just highlight one thing right now: the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund Advisory Committee, which I think at least some of you are probably familiar with, has identified a number of projects related to related to creating a welcoming and inclusive recreational opportunities. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I would be happy to answer any questions. And you all have probably heard me say before, I'm the guy who's 40 miles wide and a 1/4 inch thick, but I might be able to answer them.
Go ahead, Bob.
Good morning, Kurt. Always nice to see you, and you have always made time for us. Thank you very much. I was wondering about Senate Bill 289 in terms of convictions of bias in terms of parks. There's a groundswell of support from this from a variety of groups, and I just wondered what your agency was doing with that Senate bill.
Sure, great question. Great question, Bob. And we are actually involved in that bill. I think we've testified in support of that bill. I'm looking to Amira to give me the nod if I'm getting my details correct. And it does also include, and of course, we don't manage parks at ODFW, but we do manage, obviously, we do have state wildlife management areas that are open to the public. So where there's a nexus, certainly with fishing and hunting activities, that bill would also include license suspensions associated with any conviction. So yeah, we've been supportive of that.
Great, Quinn.
Good morning, Director Melcher, and I apologize. I know I'm sitting in this sort of awkward ray of divine light, but it feels too good to be sitting in the sunshine to move. So I apologize for that. But I was curious if you could give a little bit of an update on I know there's at least a handful of vehicles to restore funding for the Oregon Conservation and Rec Fund. It's a really important program that has given grant funding to a bunch of really great community programs. So, I just want to make sure we're tracking, which ones are getting traction and figure out ways we can potentially support it.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Quinn. And good to see you, even if you are in a ray of sunshine right now. And I apologize. I won't recall the bill number, but the governor's omnibus bill actually includes the elimination of the sunset on the Conservation and Recreation Fund and Advisory Committee. Oh, and Amira's chatting me up to help me out. Thanks, Amira. That's House Bill 2171. That bill includes removal of the sunset. It includes restoration of the general fund apportionment. And that's, of course, for the next biennium. We are fundraising right now, and I believe we're well over $350,000. Maybe it's even north of that now in terms of donations that have been generated. And we do have a commitment from the Ways and Means Tri-Chair Johnson that she is going to restore the general fund that was swept, at least to match the donations that we've received so far. And that bill, I believe, is moved out of committee and may well be, I guess it would be probably on its way to Ways and Means.
Thank you, Director Melcher. I'm also just curious, with all that money, congratulations on all that fundraising. I'm curious, do you have a sense of where that money is coming from? Is it mostly small individual donors? Is it fewer larger donors? I'm just curious some of the patterns there.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, the first thing we did, and of course, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the original concept, the legislature in the last long session, they appropriated $1 million to fund the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, but they put a really big, I won't even call it a string. It was a really big, large, rope attached to it that said before we could access that $1 million of general fund, we had to generate $1 million in private, non-state, non-federal donations. And so we embarked on that. And then of course, COVID hit, which really, really limited a lot of folks' ability to fundraise in a traditional sense. So we pivoted to a degree, and we put up on our licensing website for our customers who are purchasing licenses the opportunity to donate. And we've received, I think the majority of that $350,000 has been through very small, $5, $10 donations from our license holders. But then we have received some larger donations as well from foundations. So I could get you the exact breakdown, but it's a composite of, and even the quote unquote large donations aren't really that large. It's not like somebody wrote us $1 million check, but a lot of them were very small donations.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Good seeing you. Look forward to meeting in person again.
Soon.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got Forestry next. Andy White and Ryan Gordon, one or both of you. Sweet.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? All right. Good morning. Andy White with the Oregon Department of Forestry. He, him, his. And I'm in the same camp as Amira and Joel. I'm a cheesecake fan, preferably with a little pineapple on top. And for anyone who's interested, I think I've found the best cheesecake in Portland. It's at a restaurant called Just a Pasta in the Pearl District. So should you get to Portland and you like cheesecake, check out Just a Pasta. I do dessert first when I go there. So just putting in a little shameless plug. I'll make this quick. Some of the themes that you've heard with some of the other agency reports, looking at kind of the DEI focus internal to the department. We're building the framework for a DEI council internal to the agency. And basically that council has begun meeting with our area offices as well as our districts, partially to just create awareness and also to solicit interest in forming the council from some of our districts across the state. And, you know, I guess at the 100,000 foot level, figuring out the best way to create awareness and alignment and the ability to embed DEI as a part of how we do business, as opposed to, you know, just having it be buzzwords that everybody's used to. Where does the rubber meet the road, and how do we embed that in the way we do business, in our policies and our decision making, so that it's not just internal, but the way that we deal with stakeholders as well. And as other agencies have mentioned, we also have a policy option package for a DEI position that will be, if we're able to get that, we'll be working with our human resources staff as well as our internal counsel, looking at our policies, recruitment, retention, how we're doing onboarding, and all other matters that allow us to support the DEI council. And then in that same theme, I guess another point on the DEI side is with the climate change framework that's being developed, we also have a policy option package there that includes a DEI position there as well. And the intent there is to have that position focus in those areas where we're trying to help manage urban forestry and looking at those impacted communities. And that position would be external facing, whereas the previous position would be helping us develop policies. This one would be external facing, helping those community organizations and communities that are impacted by urban forestry policies, and providing access to either technical assistance or financial assistance to help manage those urban forests, whether it's the homeowner with 2 acres in their backyard, and again, focusing on those areas that have been traditionally underserved. And I would say that, you know, those previous positions that I'd mentioned were more internal, this one would be much more external, and there would be an obvious connection with our internal positions as well, to make sure that we have continuity in our messaging, and also trying to maximize the limited capacity we have in those positions. So we're excited to see where that goes. And it's been, I will say, the internal work that we've done it's created some great conversations around how the agency thinks about this. And right now I'd say internally, we're just trying to level the playing field to get people on the same page to understand what we're trying to accomplish. And we've had a lot of frank conversations with folks, and it's been outstanding to have those conversations. We've been able to create some safe spaces where we've had conversations that maybe I did never think was possible. So I'm excited about where we're going internally, as well as the possibilities of getting some of this capacity to help us focus externally within our urban forestry program. So I'll stop there and maybe focus the rest of my time on questions.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. This is partly directed to you, and I think partly directed to all of our agency partners. And I think there's a couple things that are coming up with me. One, I'm excited to hear these investments. You know, I go back to, it was probably 12 years ago when we had worked on kind of cultural competency language for positions. You know, certainly, I think 5 years ago that we put out the EJ Best Practices Handbook. You know, it's exciting for me to see this kind of continuation work that has been a long time coming in terms of infrastructure. I think there's a couple questions that are, and maybe a comment that's coming up for me. One, it would be interesting to hear how these positions might interact or may serve as the EJ agency advocate, and what that relationship is. I mean, my sense is that for all of these agencies, you know, being able to combine both the DEI work with the environmental justice work, it seems like it would make a lot of sense. So that would be one piece. The other piece I would say is it would be great to, you know, assuming that these positions are funded and hired, to actually engage with all of these groups. I mean, my biggest question is like, you know, is there any kind of centralized coordination or convening of these positions? And I'll say just, you know, in our small little world of Multnomah County, being able to bring these positions together that often feel isolated, you know, a lot of banging the head against the wall, even at the best, even in the best circumstances, will be really important for those folks' sustainability and you know, ability to thrive in agencies. So I'll stop there, but I guess, you know, I'd be interested to hear for every agency that's going to come and also have the same sort of vision, kind of speaking to kind of what do you see as the role and relationship to the EJ task force, and how is EJ being embedded into this concept of DEI, however that's being defined, because I think there's so many, you know, key intersections between best practices around environmental justice, you know, meaningful involvement, you know, safety, trust, and belonging, right? Accessibility, inclusion, all those things. So I'd be interested for folks to kind of outline that vision and how it might intersect with our work.
So great questions, Ben. And I think I guess probably my answer is I don't know for sure how that's going to play out. And if we get those positions, our executive team, we will definitely have a conversation around, do Ryan and I step back and have the DEI position be that conduit of information to EJ, because there's a lot of common themes there in the work that we're trying to do with EJ, as well as the work we're trying to do internally from a DEI perspective. So I don't know where that'll end up. I know we will have that conversation if we get that position, that position or positions. I'm excited about the opportunity. I hope we get those positions so we can have that conversation and figure out how we leverage that talent to kind of maximize the effort downstream. And I think regardless of how we end up doing that, I guess just for the task force to know, Ryan and I are going to be readily available. So whether it's us continuing forward or us doing a seamless transition with somebody in that DEI seat, I'm not exactly sure, but we're going to make it work well so that we don't lose the continuity, and making sure that we have that direct connection to the field so that we can make sure if we do go that route where we put the DEI coordinator or the DEI person as the citizen advocate, that we still have that person directly connected to the field, so we understand how the policies that we're implementing in the field and the work that we do is making progress or making impacts in the underserved communities. Because I think we want to make sure we understand either where we're falling short or where we're making progress, so that we can have frank conversations with this group going forward. All right, looks like Valentine had a question or comment.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, for your continuing participation in these meetings. And I want to go back to a discussion that we had in 2019. I think it was before the pandemic, and it was around language accessibility. If I recall, ODF was going to evaluate the system it had in place and determine whether it would go through a new venture when it comes to interpretation services. And so I just want to get a sense of where we're at on that. I know that, COVID-19 altered a lot of our priorities and have shifted to other issues. And I think as we learn, during this pandemic, language accessibility is so critical. And so I just want to know where we're at on that.
Yeah, so we and other state agencies do have access, and I forget the vendor's name. It was a contract set up through Department of Administrative Services. And as we were having those conversations, there were, I don't know if it's negotiations is the right word, going on between the Department of Administrative Services and various vendors to provide access for those state agencies. And so that access exists and has existed. I guess that conversation was ongoing as we were having these conversations with the task force. And so our district offices now have that contact information if they need access to, it's a language line essentially.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Andy. Appreciate you coming and giving us an update. Just, yeah, I'm super excited to see how all this plays out. Seems like there's a tidal wave of investments, across agencies, both of this from the city to the county to the state level and federal level. So, yeah, I'm excited to see how this all plays out.
Yep, we got a lot of momentum right now.
Let's keep it up.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, I think we've got obviously Azel from the PUC.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Ezel Watson, and I'm going to be giving the update for Oregon's Public Utilities Commission. Starting with my gender pronouns, I use he, him, or them, they. And to answer the question about my favorite dessert, I'm just gonna, you guys are a lot of cheesecake fans out here. I like everything that's associated with the cheesecake except the cheesecake, all the fruits. So you could have a Honey Crisp apple, my favorite, which is watermelon. But then also we have strawberries and blueberries, which I will be having for lunch today after at the conclusion of our meeting. So now to the update for the Public Utilities Commission. We have a few items that we'd like to discuss. One is the hiring of me, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Director. And I'll be, of course, serving as the advocate to the Environmental Justice Task Force. And I am serving, I'm gonna probably butcher this, so I'm gonna go back to my work plan, but the interagency work group on climate change and how it relates to impacted communities. I'll be the staffer associated there as well. Another update that we have that we believe is environmental justice related are our extended customer protections in the way of the disconnection moratorium, which we do have coming up at a May meeting. There will be additional discussion and dialogue and likely a decision made by commissioners on extending or ending this moratorium. Additionally, Executive Order 20-04 and the action that we're taking to reduce and regulate greenhouse gas emissions, specifically calling attention to the disproportionate impact on varying communities as outlined in Executive Order 2004. Also, I think of additional importance, talking about our environment or the environment that our customers seem to find themselves in. We have debt relief programs that we have been managing in the way of arrearage management and grants, time payment assistance programs that our commissioners and agency have been working closely with utilities to help customers manage their arrearages, their past due bills that have accumulated as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. Lastly, and again, let me caveat, our agency takes no position on any bill, but we do think that it is important to note House Bill 2475, and which discusses the energy burden and potentially differentiated rates. And I will also provide a written update of this information. I just needed to get approval on it first. So I will be sending that up at the conclusion of our meeting as well. I welcome the space for questions.
Any questions for Ezel?
Quinn, I do see your hand.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I was just curious, looking at the bill that you just mentioned, 2475. I'm wondering, so what does I see consider a lot, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice issues in legislation. And I'm wondering for this bill, what practically does it mean that the agency may consider differentials in energy burdens? How does that actually play out?
Well, that's predicated on whether or not the bill passes. That's what we're saying. So that's why we say potential, because this is the first bill that would introduce the ability to consider differentiating rates based on customer class.
I have some just quick updates on that, Quinn. I can chat about later about 2475. Yeah, happy to cover it.
Thank you very much for your question, Quinn, and way to make me nervous, because I don't. We take no position on any bills. Okay.
And maybe that's an issue too to discuss as a task force is what it means in practice, because I'm seeing that a lot. I know we've had discussions about that as well in crafting language for legislation. Is what does it actually allow agencies to do? We say you may consider certain different factors.
And I would welcome, after your follow-up with Joel, that if there's additional information that you guys are seeking, I can refer you over to Robin Freeman. She has worked extensively with that bill.
Great, thanks so much. Bob?
Thank you very much and welcome. I serve on that interagency committee as the EJTF representative, and I'm delighted to have staff. Amira knows we've been working quite hard. Many agency people have devoted their time and dime to really trying to figure out the second prong of that executive order. I've slammed it home in a number of meetings, and I can share with you those memos. But my question to you is, how can we help you? How could EJTF help you, Azal? Please, thank you.
Sure. Well, initially, I think sharing some information, but I would ask that the biggest help for me would be to share information in a concise manner. What I get mostly from agencies, because I'm very new, I'm only exactly 2 months and 6 days into my role. And I get inundated with so much information that I don't know what I don't know. And now it becomes more difficult to prioritize what's important from here. So if what we could really do that would help me would be like a 2-paragrapher, 1-pager at the most for how you see the Public Utilities Commission functioning in this work group. Because right now in our work plan, the DEI director serves as he's just the go-between. He, she, or they, just happens to be he, serves as the go-between between so many different agencies that I may need to ask for some additional resource to be allocated, but I need to make sure that I can give a clear values assessment or of where those resources would be spent. So does that answer your question at all, Bob? Thank you. Thank you. That was a great question, by the way, and I'm glad to have help.
I'm going to ask it again every time too.
I do have a question. This is Jim. In the nature of your position, like if a group of individuals wanted to become an intervener in a docket or in a case, would you help them understand the ropes of how to become an intervener? What are the rules involved in the process so that they can represent themselves to the decision makers? Will you assist them in any way in accessing the system?
Absolutely. Now, Jim, I would be more of, at this restaurant, I'm more of the host. So I'm going to show you to your seat and we're going to introduce you to your server, i.e. I would be ushering them along to a member of our agency that would help walk them through the process of the actual docket and intervening process, but I would definitely get them connected. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and maybe we could have some side discussions because I'm very involved in several dockets in the electric division and also working with the Oregon Department of Energy. Both have very steep learning curves to the normal public. And I would like to see if I could work with you, and I'm trying to work with ODOE. They do have a citizen participation manual that we've kind of tweaked a little bit and worked with them on, but like to maybe work with you on something to get an introductory manual so somebody entering the system isn't overwhelmed and has the ability to participate from a position of knowledge.
I welcome that. I've posted my email address in the chat. I welcome them. If you send me a quick message, we can set up some time to further this type of dialogue.
Great. We'll be chatting. Thank you.
You're welcome very much.
Thanks so much, Izel. Appreciate your update. All right, gang. Let's go ahead and move on to geology and mineral industries. I think we got Ben with us today.
Good morning, Chair Boa and task force members. I'm getting pretty good at Teams on Microsoft, but Zoom I'm still fairly a novice at. It took me a while to unmute there. Thank you. I'm going to have to side with Izel. I actually have an unnamed source in Hermiston that tells me when it's time to go get the watermelons when they're at their peak. Dogami is following House Bill 5010 in the current legislative session. That would fund the department for the biennium at its current service level. Other than that, I don't believe there's much in the legislative docket that's going to affect the department. Right now, our key focus remains with the Mineland Reclamation Program in working with the 9 federally recognized tribes in ensuring the mineral development projects that are proposed statewide get adequate review and coordination to ensure that the siting of those projects does not interfere or impact cultural resources. And in the last year, I believe we have required applicants to go out and have cultural resource surveys conducted at the proposed sites at least 20 times. So again, in the short time that we've been part of this task force, we've gone from 0 cultural resource surveys being conducted to close to at least 30% of all proposed sites. So our coordination and trust with those 9 federally recognized tribes is on a high level. I believe we are getting the right information to the right people before even the weather will allow groundbreaking. So that's our primary focus, is in ensuring that those projects that are horribly earth disturbing are not impacting those cultural resources that would be lost. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thanks so much for your update.
Actually, Chair, I have one more thing to add on to that. I don't know if Ben mentioned this. I'm having a little bit of an audio issue. The task force was interested in continuing the relationship between Dogami and EJTF in the Senate Bill 286 bill. And just so you know, that agency is still included. So the relationship will be continuing in the future now that Dogami has their budget.
Great.
Thank you, Amira.
Okay. In that case, let's move on to the Oregon Health Authority. I think we have Julie with us today. Actually, no, we have Gabriella.
Good morning, Chair Boa and members of the task force. It's Gabriella Goldfarb. Julie is out this week, so I'm covering for her. It's great to see many familiar faces. It's she, her, hers are my pronouns. And it's great, so gratifying to hear the reports of all these agencies and what's happening. So anyway, happy to be here with you. I'll start with our legislative kind of update, and at the top of the list for OHA, there's one agency-wide bill, or really for the Public Health Division, and one specific to environmental public health. The priority for public health is our public health modernization policy option package, which is the funding package 417. And that's for public health modernization. And that's something that's a process that's happened in conversation with the legislature since 2013. The assessment of public health, the public health system at that time identified a lot of gaps in what was needed to have a modern public health system. And one of those big gaps was environmental health capacity at the local, tribal, and state level. And the legislature in 2017 and 2019 was able to make some down payments towards starting to address the resource gap. And the priority then was infectious disease, communicable disease, and equity and cultural competence, and assessment and epidemiology. And very grateful for that, because that put us in a bit better position than we otherwise would have been for the COVID crisis. But environmental health's turn has come with this request, and the governor did request a $30 million package for public health modernization. And for the first time, environmental health is included as would be included as one of the eligible uses. And the majority of that funding would be going to local and tribal public health authorities and community-based organizations. A portion will be retained for state functions, but really the majority would be going out to those partners in the public health system. And that represents the constraint that has been so pressing, that we do have one area of robust environmental health, which is our food pool and lodging safety programs, because those are funded by license fees. And we also have a decently resourced lead paint program compared to other places, because we can have fees that support that program. But otherwise, environmental health is funded by federal grants in this state. And not having a bench a core of capacity at the state, tribal, local public health, and community level is really a big barrier. So while other agencies have particular positions that are being allocated or asked for, or particular programs for OHA, it's through public health modernization that we're going to get environmental public health capacity. And the way we, one of the big components for that, I think we've established, one of the silver linings of the COVID crisis is that our agency used the CARES Act, the federal CARES Act funding, to fund 177 community-based organizations to provide a range of services of tracking, contact tracing, things like that, but also for direct support for wraparound services, social services for the communities they serve. And the agency is planning to try to maintain those relationships, and that's something that we in environmental health will be able to take advantage of, to have those existing relationships that have been established to be, how we channel funding to provide that local capacity to work with their local public health authorities and to provide capacity to tribal health authorities. And OHA had its budget hearing was the first budget out of the gate. And there was a lot of support, including from some of your organizations who provided testimony during the public testimony day. So that, after the co-chairs come out with their budget, we'll see where that all ends up. But for the organizations that you all represent and work with, it could be, over time, an important source of funding. Probably the amount that would be available for environmental health would allow for things like identifying impacted communities and developing plans and strategies at that governor's requested amount. And ideally, that is going to be built into OHA's budget, and in future years, as that funding process continues, there would be money for implementation. So I wanted to set expectations for what might be possible. Of course, we're in a pretty uncertain budget year, so we will see what actually comes out, and we'll have to scale whatever we can do. But I think there'll be at least some environmental health resources if the legislature allocates. So that's kind of a big one. I'm happy to stop and take any questions on that before I go on.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, it's actually not probably direct. It's not directly related to what you just said, but I'm curious. And well, Gabrielle, it's good to see you again. With Rescue Act, I'm probably messing up the name of it. I don't know what's coming to the state, but I'm curious if environmental health is thinking about kind of environmental justice investments or potential investments as the relationship, obviously, where, whether it's where people are working, whether it's, underlying health conditions related to environmental impact and burden, fill in the blanks. I'm curious if those conversations are happening at the state, or if Oregon Environmental Public Health is seeking any of those dollars, and whether EJTF could advocate on your behalf.
And I'm sorry, you cut out just a little bit, Ben, at the beginning. Were you talking which
the Federal
funding?
American Recovery Act? So the new dollars coming.
Oh, funding, the new dollars. Yeah, above my pay grade right now. So I would defer to Amira, and because that will really be, at the governor's direction in terms of how all of that gets invested. But I have some other updates that, when we do get resources, for example, we were able to get some additional federal resources, and we programmed that for COVID-related work, for example, around healthy disinfection, making sure that childcare providers weren't going over the top on how they did disinfection to make sure that they weren't creating hazards. So there's different ways that we do, channel that. But your bigger picture question about how that funding will be prioritized, I can't answer. I would observe that typically if there's that source of money to take pressure off the budget in one area, then it hopefully will give flexibility to the legislature in other areas. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And maybe we can circle back to this, Amira, as a broader conversation around where environmental justice can show up. I know some of the recovery dollars are flexible enough to be spent on things like social determinants of health, which would certainly include environmental justice. And so how do we, as a task force in conversations with the governor, advising the governor, and I think, with ideas from agency partners, be able to advocate for the direction of those dollars, whatever they end up being. We can come back.
Hey, Gabriella, good to see you again. I was just curious if you could chat with us a little bit about, I guess, OHA's ongoing discussions around vaccine distribution. I've been keeping close tab on sort of the governor's updated timeline, and it's been really great to see sort of, frontline workers and farm workers and other vulnerable communities sort of prioritize in this process. I was just hoping you could talk to us a little bit more about those conversations, and if you anticipate any other changes to the timeline or anything related to that.
Yeah, so I know that the Cherrybo, I know that the governor announced yesterday the ability to move up, particularly in the frontier community, frontier counties, to frontline counties. I'm mixing up my terms here. There's 13 counties or so that were identified that could already move into the 1B6, I think it is, grouping, which is prioritizing, a lot of frontline workers and communities of color, farm workers. And so clearly the governor has made that, has supported that priority and that acceleration. And so I think that's hitting that goal, and it's a matter of expanding it as soon as the availability of vaccine, making sure that happens statewide, and that seems to be the intention. I'm not in that direct line of the vaccine folks. I'm so curious, and I don't want to bug them because they're working insane amounts, but I think it's aligned with the direction you were talking about.
Yeah, I think in particular, my specific question, right, is I see the considerations around pre-existing health conditions, sort of age. Looks like now we're really trying to prioritize, workers, especially frontline workers. I guess I'm just curious, if you know anything, that'd be great to know. If not, maybe Amira, you can answer this question. But I've been thinking a lot about sort of communities that are frontline communities or communities that are, near point source pollution. As we all know, this is an awful respiratory infection that attacks the lungs, and particularly if you have communities that live near point source pollution or have, high cumulative impacts around indoor air pollution, outdoor air pollution, they're much more susceptible.
So Mira, I'm happy to take a first crack at that. Joel, I think you're really raising a great point, and one that we aren't equipped to act on because we don't have that data yet. It's a goal of ours that we can, for all kinds of reasons, elevate the priority on those on EJ communities or communities with EJ impacts because of where they live, proximity to roadways, proximity to industrial facilities, and outside of things like Cleaner Air Oregon, which are very much focused on individual facilities, when you have those larger groups, we're working towards that, and Bob is engaged in a lot of those conversations, but we aren't there yet to be able to incorporate it into the vaccine rollout.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I guess the only way we would be able to capture that right now is by looking at what are the health impacts that are under the vaccine eligibility, and that's put on by CDC, I think, right, Gabriella?
Yeah.
So I guess there's not really a way to catch those issues proactively, but more in the reactive space.
But there
as Gabriella was mentioning.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. there have been studies, as I'm sure you're familiar with, and why you're raising this, showing that people disproportionately affected by pollution are at higher risk of COVID. So it makes all the sense in the world. Yeah. So I'll continue on the legislative front. The other bill, which I think we might have mentioned that we were working on in the fall, is making good progress, which is our lead paint cleanup bill. So we are one of a dozen or so states that have delegated authority from EPA to implement a lead paint program that requires best practices when disturbing lead paint. And our regulated, we have to do this in partnership with the Construction Contractors Board. They regulate contractors. We regulate landlords, schools, childcare facilities. And we have had the frustrating situation that we can identify violations, that have caused a hazardous condition around a residence, but we only can give them a civil penalty for violating the rules, not require them to clean it up. And so House Bill 2077 is an OHA bill that would do exactly that. That would give us the authority both to issue stop work orders, to require cleanup, to go ahead and pay for cleanup and put a lien on the property if the property is not cleaned up in a timely fashion. That was voted out unanimously from the House committee to the floor, and it did not get unanimous votes on the House floor, but it is on its way to the Senate, so it is making good progress. A couple of other bills, there's a lot of bills that we're tracking and interested in. A couple that directly affect us are the kind of omnibus wildfire bills. There was both a governor's bill, Senate Bill 287, and then Senator Golden's share of the Natural Resources and Wildfire Response or Recovery Committee on the Senate side introduced a very similar bill, Senate Bill 248. And in both of those, OHA is charged with a lot of work around cleaner air spaces for vulnerable communities along the urban wildland interface. That aligns in part with recommendations from the Governor's Wildfire Council report from 2019 that recommended a $4 million fund to provide smoke filtration devices to disproportionately at-risk members of the community, low income, renters. We are in conversation with both Senator Golden, with Senator Golden about this bill. What's in the bill would be much more expansive in terms of commercial buildings, public buildings, as well as residences, and we'll see where that ends up. But I would think that resources allowing, it could be that at least there's funding to help get smoke filtration devices to disproportionately health burdened and at risk and under-resourced folks who are subject to wildfire smoke impacts. And the final bill I'll mention now is Rep. Marsh's Healthy Homes Bill. That's House Bill 2842. And Rep. Marsh has been working on this bill for a few sessions, and this session came to OHA. OHA's State Health Improvement Plan, Healthier Together Oregon, really is a big change from previous state health improvement plans in that it really centers both racial equity and social determinants of health. And housing is one of the key issues there. And so while housing rehabilitation and weatherization and all those things are not our expertise, we are good at convening people and bringing people to the table. And so we don't take any position on the bill, but we have been providing technical information to Rep. Marsh as she shepherds that bill. And it would establish the current version would establish a $20 million fund. And the idea is to have comprehensively address environmental health risks for low income and communities of color. So, so I'll leave the legislative update there because I'm already taking up a lot of time and I have a few other things I wanted to mention. So unless there's any questions about that, I'll move on.
No, I just wanted to, I guess, quickly ask. I know 2842 also has the potential to receive some funding from the federal government as well to bolster that $20 million ask. But I guess I was just curious, from your perspective, how would 2842 work congruently with I think you said 2077?
2077 is more reactive. I mean, is a reactive thing, and it comes out of. I mean, right now we still have a very small program, small number of people. So we hope we have been able to build up our staffing from 1 person to 1.5 people, but mostly it's a complaint-driven system.
Sure.
And so that's going to go forward, regardless.
Sure.
And it's about cleaning up, a situation. I think the idea with Rep Marsh is really about, there's a lot of resources already going, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of upgrades. I think my question specifically was for 2077, if you are, right, like fined or held accountable for, right, or are you eligible for 2842 funding?
Oh, I don't think so, no, because this funding is going to go, well, I guess there's some situations.
Because there might be a situation in which, you get fined, for not being a good actor and not cleaning this up. Yeah. And then you apply for funding for the $20 million to 2842 through OHA. Are they going to be able to access that funding?
No, in the sense that not through us. So that funding that for the through the Healthy Homes program would be going to intermediary organizations. So it'll be going to, we won't be taking applications from individuals.
Sounds good.
So, yeah. Okay, so I will try and touch briefly on a few other things. Under the Governor's Climate and Health Executive Order 2004, you might have seen in December, we issued our first deliverable, which is the Climate and Health in Oregon report, and that is going to be an annual report. And I'm happy to circulate afterwards. Well, actually, we'll be sending you, I'm sorry, we don't have the written report in, but we'll provide a link to that in our written report to you. And it centers, concerns about equity in climate work and how do we maximize health co-benefits of climate mitigation work. So those are a couple of big focal areas. Another deliverable or direction to OHA was to work with Oregon OSHA on worker protection standards for extreme heat and wildfire smoke for outdoor workers. And that rulemaking process got kicked off 2 weeks ago. So it's still early days. And we are learning at OHA, we have not participated in OHA rulemakings before, so this is a lot of learning for us. But I think there's unprecedented participation by community-based organizations in this rulemaking. And I think we are all going to learn a lot. I think from what I understand, it seems like smoke is going to be an easier lift than heat. So while they are starting out in parallel, OSHA is committed to, adopting as soon as one can be adopted, as soon as they get to a proposal that that they feel can be adopted and with engagement of all the stakeholders. So the last climate and health executive order or climate executive order item is our study on youth depression, climate change and youth depression and mental health. And that's an area that we've really been wanting to work in for a long time. And the way we're structuring the project, it is prioritizing and focusing on youth of color and youth-led voices. And so we're partnering, for example, with an organization in Southern Oregon that is working with talent high school kids on an oral story sharing project. We are providing funding to tribes for this work directly, and we'll come back with more details about that project in the future. We are kicking off an updating of our climate and health resilience plan. The task force was involved in the first plan that we adopted in 2017. It was a 5-year plan. So the next plan, we're just starting on the process of the next plan, which will come out for 2022. And we'll be coming to you for input and engagement on that. Let's see, a couple of other things related to disaster. We were able to get a disaster recovery and resilience grant from CDC, and we're working on that, partnering with United Way of Columbia Willamette to pilot a new disaster resilience collaborative, and it's being facilitated by communities of color for CBOs who are led by and serving by rural communities of color. And the goals are to increase disaster resilience by advancing equitable systems, strengthening relationships across CBOs and the public sector, offering trauma-informed workshops and a mini grant opportunity. We are also providing grants to all 9 tribes in Oregon for projects that will build resilience to impacts environmental disasters on community health and well-being. And we are switching away from disaster resilience. Our environmental public health tracking is going through a civic design process to really make sure that a resuscitated portal that was down for many years that is now coming online is actually answering questions that communities have. So with that, I will leave the rest for our written report and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much. Any quick questions before we move on? Go ahead, Valentin.
I don't have a question, just a comment, and this is regarding the wildfire smoke and the heat stress. And I think that it's very critical that we listen to farm workers during this process, because we need to, get it right. Otherwise, we would be seeing improvements in the regulation 10, 15, 20 years from now. And so I want to encourage OHA and Oregon OSHA to allow farm workers to have a say during the process. We really need to listen to how they haven't been protected in the past. And that's the only comment that I wanted to mention.
Thank you, and for that comment. And I will carry that message. This is the OSHA rulemaking process, and they have their ways, but we are partnering with them, and so I think it would be very helpful to have a listening session or something like that. So I will take that recommendation to the team that's running the rulemaking process.
Great. Thanks so much, Gabriela. All right, gang, it is 10:36. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. Folks want to get up, stretch, get some coffee, water, bio breaks, all that good stuff. See y'all back here at 10:41. All right, gang. Let's go ahead and get back to it. So I think next we have an update from Land Conservation and Development. I think we have Sadie here or someone else.
Chair Boa, I'm not seeing Sadie. Maybe she had to step away, but
maybe she'll come back.
Yes, and if there's someone else from DLCD, just raise your hand as an attendee so I can pull you into the room.
And if not, we can always go back to them if we have someone from Jessica from the Marine Board or someone else from the Marine Board today.
I am not seeing Jessica either.
In that case, I know Michael's here. We'd love to hear from Aura Osha.
Okay, great.
I know he said he was having some trouble getting connected to sound. I don't know if you see him in here, Mira.
Yes, I just pulled him in. And then Harmony.
Harmony.
Harmony Bright is also in, so I will have her as a panelist, and she can go after Michael.
Sweet, sounds good.
Okay, you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, good morning. It is good to see you folks again. Oregon OSHA has been here through recent meetings, but the last time I talked with you was either pre or early COVID, and I do want to apologize to Courtney for my panicked questions in the chat box as I was confused this morning with things that the rest of you have navigated, and I appreciate the patience. So I am Michael Wood. I'm the administrator of Oregon OSHA, he, him. It is good to be back, and I want to talk just, I'll try to make this quick because I know that you're tight for time. I do want to just remind folks that the COVID-19 impact on workplaces throughout the state and therefore on Oregon OSHA has been significant. We have received more than 22,000 complaints from workers in the public about COVID-19 issues in Oregon workplaces. That amounts to 11 years worth of our normal complaint volume. At the same time, over the last year, we received 4,000 non-COVID complaints, presumably because we were more visible and our complaint processes were more visible. We actually received twice as many non-COVID complaints as we would have in a normal year. So if you figure that out, that means we've got 13 years of complaint intakes in the past 12 months. Our system didn't break, but it did make us revisit the way we do a lot of things and really go through an all hands on deck process that has affected a lot of our activity over the past 12 months. And in addition, of course, it resulted in its own rulemaking, which I'll talk about in a moment. I do want to touch on our efforts to improve our language outreach. You folks may remember that we had a Spanish language conference late in 2019 and planned to make that an annual event. It was not only in Spanish, but it was worker focused, and we did provide translation opportunities for other languages as well. And it was presented in Spanish rather than everything being through translation. We thought it was very successful. We were really looking forward to building upon it. And we will still build upon it once we get back to the point that we're doing conferences again. As with all our conferences, it sort of was held in abeyance for the last year. We also have built using a similar approach. We have, for all our significant rulemakings, we've started scheduling an evening hearing that is in Spanish, and the presiding officer speaks in Spanish. We do, depending on the technical issues, we have to have those sometimes translated, the Q&A. But again, it's a Spanish language venue that is designed for Spanish speakers. We've sort of built that. What we need to do now is a better job of getting the word out and promoting it so that we have people take advantage of that opportunity. And we do plan to continue to offer that opportunity and really make it part of our standard operation. With regard to some significant rulemaking, we adopted a couple temporary rules last year related specifically to COVID-19, one to labor housing and field sanitation and agriculture, one later in the year that took effect in November that applied to all workplaces. We have a rule proposed now that would effectively extend the comprehensive workplace rule, because we can't have a temporary rule in place for more than 180 days. And so the temporary rule we adopted expires May 4th. Right now, the comments on our rulemaking are probably in the we've received a very large number of comments, probably more, or we certainly will receive more than we did for the pesticide rulemaking a number of years ago. In contrast to that rulemaking, however, the comments are between 95 and 97% negative about the idea of an Oregon OSHA rule. Even most of the worker representatives who testified in the hearings actually testified against rulemaking for COVID-19 in the workplace rather than in support of it. The hearings are completed, but the comment period ends April 2nd, and I will go ahead and post a link on the summary of that proposal in the chat box. If I successfully find the chat box again, everything has moved. Well, it does when you come to a panelist, everything changes. There we go. Okay. Whoops, I should share that for the entire audience. We also pulled the labor housing portion of that COVID-19 rulemaking out and handled it separately with a proposal that we filed a little bit later. Those public hearings begin this week, and the written comment period on that runs through April 16th. In both these cases, we intend to have rules in place that or make the decision as to whether or not to adopt the rules by the 1st of May or very close to that, so that we can have a seamless transition. There's an executive order handling labor housing right now that expires at the end of April. And so those are kind of the COVID-19 activities. The other two rules that I planned on mentioning, actually you've already talked about as part of the Oregon Health Authority update. One relates to wildfire smoke. We are in the early stages. And with regard to making sure we get participation from frontline workers, that's actually something my staff has been talking about, and they plan to talk to the Rulemaking Advisory Committee at Thursday's meeting about doing probably one or two evening forums, that listening sessions, I think is what Gabriella called them. And yeah, that's we did that. We did a worker-focused forum when we were in the early stages of moving forward on the temporary COVID-19 rule, and I think that worked well. And so we'll certainly plan to move forward on that as well. And then as was mentioned, we're sort of working in parallel with the wildfire smoke rule and the heat stress rule. We do believe that the heat stress rule will end up being more complicated, so that at some point they'll no longer be operating in parallel. And the wildfire smoke rule will move forward probably more rapidly than the heat stress rule, but the team has overlapping membership from my side, so it also allows us to ensure that we are coordinating those. And then I should also mention that we are one of the rulemaking projects that was sort of held in abeyance as a result of COVID-19 was re-energizing our standing ag labor housing project, not about COVID, but about ag labor housing in general. And we do plan to have that up and running later this spring, so that we'll begin to move forward on sort of our standard book of business, as well as the COVID-19 issues related to rulemaking. I want to mention 3 pieces of legislation. There's actually a lot more legislation related to Oregon OSHA than there is in a typical session this year. But I did want to mention 3 that I thought would be of particular interest to this committee. One of them is House Bill 2813, which was specific to the wildfire smoke issue. And it appears that it will not be moving forward. I want to make clear that the fact it's not moving forward does not affect our rulemaking in any way. We didn't need that bill to move forward with rulemaking. We didn't need additional authority. It simply would have framed some of the discussion in a particular way. In addition, I don't believe Boley is here to present this morning, and so these are 2 bills that sort of overlap. They relate to the discrimination and retaliation provisions of the Oregon Safe Employment Act. Now, Oregon OSHA enforces almost all of the Oregon Safe Employment Act, but when it comes to retaliation and discrimination complaints, people saying that they exercised their rights under the law, and as a result, the employer took action against them. Perhaps, firing a complainant, but that's not the only example. Those complaints are filed with the Bureau of Labor and Industries. And there are 2 bills that would make changes to that process specifically. House Bill 2420 would extend the statute of limitations on filing a discrimination complaint, which is 90 days in Oregon. It's actually 30 days in the federal system, but it's 90 days in Oregon. It actually would extend it to a year. And the other provision is Senate Bill 483, which would essentially reverse the presumption that Boley has to prove its case, and therefore a worker has to prove their case by a preponderance of evidence. And there are 3 elements that really need to be proven. You need to show that there was protected activity, that you did something that is covered by the Oregon Safe Employment Act as protected activity, filed a complaint, complained to your employer about the need for training, whatever. There also needs to be adverse action. It can't just be that your boss is mad at you. There needs to have been some action taken that can be pointed to that has a financial or tangible workplace consequence. And then you have to prove that there's a nexus between those 2, that there is an indication that the adverse action was a result of retaliation for the protected activity in which you engaged. What 483 would do is reverse the presumption on that last element, so that if you show that if you show that you had protected activity and you show that there was adverse action, the employer would then need to demonstrate that it was not retaliation. And so it would presume retaliation in those cases. Both those bills are still alive and are scheduled for work session. And I just thought that you might have an interest in them. With that, I could go on for half an hour, but I think probably it's best if I just say I'm ready for questions.
Questions?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for that summary of what's happening regarding workplace protection. First, I wanted to just say, I'm happy to hear that Oregon OSHA will be doing the Spanish Worker Conference every year. We had the opportunity to be at that event, and it was, I thought it was a very safe place for workers to go and learn about the various services that are available and learn more about the work that Oregon OSHA does. And I think that the level of interest at the very first worker conference shows that people have been waiting for these types of conferences. And so I'm happy to hear that it will be an annual thing. The other thing, I had one question, Michael. So on the wildfire smoke and the heat stress regulation, are we including labor housing as well, or that would be separate? How that would be handled?
That's a good question, Valentine. Thank you. And thank you for the comments about the conference. Yeah, I was actually very jazzed by the level of participation and by the patience folks had with me delivering my comments in Spanish. For anybody who wasn't at the conference, I made it very clear that I am not a Spanish speaker. One semester of college Spanish didn't get me there, but people were indulgent. With regard to the ALH implications regarding heat and regarding smoke, we are planning to not address those in the heat stress and the wildfire smoke rules, but to address them in the context of the comprehensive ag labor housing rule. And it's part of the reason why it's important that we get it rolling again. With some of the issues related to smoke intrusion, for example, also apply to pesticide intrusion, apply to protecting people from disease. I mean, when you start talking about ventilation, the ability to seal the cabin, all those sorts of things, it's much broader than just smoke. And in addition, as you know, our ag labor housing rules are all located in one place. So we don't want to have two sets of rulemaking activities going on simultaneously that are both amending the same sets of rules. And we certainly don't want to put the ag labor housing requirements related to smoke or related to heat someplace else rather than putting them in the ALH standards themselves.
I guess my only concern is that I'm afraid that we may have a huge gap in between. And so I feel that somehow they're interconnected, and I'm trying to figure out what the process would be to ensure that we don't have gaps in the regulation and we end up not protecting farm workers adequately given the substandard housing standards that we have. And so that's just one major concern that I have. It's similarly with the issue around pesticide drift. We know that while the labor housing is sitting in the middle of orchards and you have pesticide being applied all around it, even on top of the roof, we failed to protect farm workers. And so that's just one big concern that I have, and I'm trying to figure out what the solution would be, but I wanted to just raise that here today.
I appreciate that, and I think you're exactly right. That's a real concern. I think that to the degree there's a gap, I hope it's a gap in timing and not ultimately in substance. And so there may be, as is the issue with pesticides, as you know, we committed to do the ag labor housing comprehensive rewrite in part of the discussion following the pesticide rulemaking. And then it was delayed for some other reasons and then got knocked completely askew by the COVID-19 activities. We're still committed to moving forward in addressing ag labor housing. I don't know whether we'll do it on as fast a track as the wildfire smoke rule will be operating on. So it is possible that there will be a gap for a time, but I'm certainly committed to there not being a substantive gap over the long term. Anything else?
I'm just curious. I know that, the agencies usually don't take positions on bills, but if you all have been tracking 2205.
We have been tracking 2205, and we don't usually take positions on bills. Frankly, there were a couple bills that were proposed this year that caused an exception to that practice, but those have gone by the wayside. We have been tracking 2205. We are particularly interested not only in the effects of the -1 amendment, but there's a plan -2 to try to address some of the operational concerns that we've had in conversation with the advocates for the bill. And I think that those largely will be addressed, and for us it'll just become a matter of funding if the bill goes forward.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Great. Well, thanks so much again, Michael, for being here with us.
Happy to be here, and I will try to do better over the next year than I have over the last year.
You've been busy.
Yeah.
Super busy. Okay, gang. We have a few more updates to go. Trying to see here who responded.
Yes, Chair. I think Harmony, David, and Allie said they could talk, and I think Harmony said she had to leave by 11.
Yeah.
So if she's able to go first, that might help.
Yeah, if she's still here, we'd love to hear from Harmony. Great.
Yep, I'm still here. Thank you. So I have quite a few updates, but I'm going to try to write them down and get them to you in a memo, because you guys just have a deluge of information. I did want to just begin by introducing Breeze Potter. You don't get to see her or hear from her, but she was hired middle of last year. She's our IWRS Integrated Water Resource Strategy Coordinator and Rules Coordinator. She'll be coordinating the 2022 update. Oh, yay! We can add her so she can say hello. She'll be coordinating the update to the strategy. She's also our department's representative on the interagency work group on climate impacts and impacted communities. So Breeze, I don't know if you want to quickly say hello.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me at this meeting. I just kind of wanted to touch base with this group, given the other work that I've been doing. And as we begin ramping up with the IWRS update planning, I anticipate that there will be some additional kind of back and forth with this entity and others around environmental justice issues. So just wanted to say hello to everyone. Thank you.
And we, the department just kicked off an internal diversity, equity, and inclusion work group, and Breeze is helping with that as well. We've just had one meeting, but we're drafting a charter and a work plan, and we look forward to providing future updates on that. We are co-presenting the Climate Equity Blueprint at the Northwest Climate Conference, along with DLCD, OHA, and ODF, and we're really honored to be a part of that work. And just really, I mean, the work that they are all doing is really incredible, and I'm just totally humbled and inspired by everything I see that, you know, Emily York and Julie Cifuentes, and there's just really incredible work going on. I did want to update you on agency EJ related bills and budgets. So the governor did include $1.5 million at the request of the Racial Justice Council to establish a place-based community-centered program to address water needs of Black, Indigenous, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, and tribal communities by addressing Indigenous treaty water rights, water scarcity, and ecosystem services in the Water Resources Department. So we have just a one-pager written up on that, and I'd be happy to send that along to you. We had our budget testimony on the 15th and the 17th, and a public hearing was held on the 22nd. Another one to note that we have been working on is House Bill 3101, which would modernize well construction standards in the state of Oregon. And that's important for everyone in Oregon, because that helps make sure that our groundwater stays safe for drinking. It helps protect our groundwater. And this program, or this bill, if it went forward, would also establish a grant program for abandoning, repairing, or replacing wells, with some prioritization given for those affected by natural disasters, as well as assistance for lower income households. So that may be one that you want to keep track of. There are also a number of other EJ related bills and that we are not taking a position on, but may be of interest to this group. There are a number focused on collecting information about groundwater resources. We are seeing, declining groundwater levels in various areas across the state, which does have impacts on, rural domestic water users, as well as groundwater dependent ecosystems, springs, and also threatens the long-term sustainability of, agriculture in the state. So that's House Bill 2018 and House Bill 3242. Then there's one that's doesn't necessarily pertain directly to our agency, but House Bill 3089 would establish public drinking water and sewer ratepayer assistance fund. Breeze and myself were able to attend a national call on water yesterday for World Water Day. Happy World Water Day, everyone. That was put together by the Water Equity and Climate Resilience Caucus. And one thing that they mentioned, and one thing that we've heard from our partners doing work on water equity and water justice, is that people in COVID, they have been threatened with their water being shut off, which is a really frightening prospect. And so, that fund might be able to help with something like that. But just thinking about kind of vulnerability to not having water, access to water, is of heightened concern to many. And it's something that we heard on that call, as well as just a need to think about both water, drinking water, and sanitation, that those really need to go hand in hand. Then two really exciting updates for place-based planning, and I'll include more in my written update, but the Mid-Coast Water Planning Partnership, which is basically Lincoln County, we've just finished putting together a story map, which provides information about water resources in the Mid-Coast region. And this was developed based off of questions that were posed to the partnership through a big outreach engagement with the Oregon's Kitchen Table. And that was actually done in English, Spanish, and in Mom. And Mom is not a written language, it's only spoken. I think, I don't know a whole lot, but I think it's maybe people who have immigrated from Guatemala. But that's amazing. Oregon's Kitchen Table does really incredible work to reach people that the rest of us would not be able to. So we use their questions to create this story map, which includes photographs, it includes maps, images, narrative, and then we're also working with Story Gorge, which is an organization out of the gorge on some multimedia storytelling, and may have the opportunity to translate that with some small grant funds from Oregon Community Foundation. So I'll include a link to the story map. You should check it out just to get a sense of the water world. And then also the Harney Community-Based Water Collaborative just put out a, what are they calling it? A campaign style website to help the community understand the groundwater situation out there, and then also figure out how they can take action to reduce groundwater use. They're going to be building out that website over time, but that will give you an idea of the water situation that they're facing out there and what they're doing about it. And that's just an area where I will probably be giving you all more updates. We're looking at rulemaking out in that area to designate a critical groundwater area, and just larger trends that we're seeing around groundwater, and a lot of interest and concern that I'm hearing from members of the public. We are also seeking public feedback on the Walla Walla groundwater study work plan and public participation plan. So we have entered into a contract with the U.S. Geological Survey to better understand groundwater resources in the Walla Walla Basin. We learned a lot from a groundwater study advisory committee that we did in the Harney Basin around that groundwater study process. And we're using all of the lessons learned from that to develop a public participation plan for the Walla Walla. And we're accepting feedback. Well, we accept feedback always, but specific feedback by this Thursday. And yeah, we're really looking forward to working with folks out in the Walla Walla. But I think a challenge for us is, getting beyond the people who have already been, who have already participated heavily in water discussions, kind of reaching further than that, because ultimately these decisions affect everyone who lives in these places. It doesn't just affect the people who, have traditionally shown up. So we're trying to figure out how to reach a broader audience. And those are the highlights. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Harmony. I know all the hard work you've been doing on this. Hard to keep up with it all. It's moving so fast. One specific point I heard was a rulemaking for a specific geographic area. Usually rulemakings are for statewide applications, and that's a different type of EJ engagement. If you're making a rulemaking specifically on Harney County, then in terms of that, it would be nice to see EJ participation from the place the rulemaking is for, which is Harney County. So I know there's farm worker communities out there. I think it wouldn't be hard to find, but when you do geographically specific rulemaking that includes precise communities as opposed to a statewide rulemaking, then the opportunity for grassroots and opportunity and obligation to include grassroots community groups is a lot better. And the work is great. You know how I really like it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would actually love to follow up with you. The collaborative group out there could probably benefit from your connections with others out there, and we certainly would as well. Those are not communities we've reached through the collaborative or through our efforts. So I think we can definitely make some improvements there.
This is Jim. I just want to mention that with Harney County, I do know of some organizations out in that area. So if you could loop me in also, I might be able to help in making contact with some folks.
That would be really helpful. Yeah, and one thing I would just note, Bob, is in our in our statute and our rules, we have the ability to do basin program rulemaking. So account for the kind of hydrologic and social and political realities. As long as it's consistent with that statewide statute, we do have some flexibility at the local level, which is really fortunate for water management because it does vary so much from place to place.
And it's very why place studies fit as a methodology because of that type of regulatory authority that you do not find anywhere else in any state agency. So, but thank you.
Any other questions? Great, thanks so much, Harmony. And
thank you all.
Breeze. Okay. So I really want to make sure that we have time for Nargis to start around 11:25. So I think we have Ali and David left. If y'all could keep your comments to no more than 10 minutes each, that'd be great. So I think Ali, go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Boa, task force members. Ali Ryan Hansen, Department of State Lands. My pronouns are she, hers. I will be quick and follow up with a written report. I first wanted to touch on some work the department has coming up with our strategic plan. We are planning an examination of our policies, practices, work related to environmental justice, social justice, racial justice, as well as equity, diversity, inclusion. Our model for the strategic planning work is to have a sort of an agency-wide horizontal approach that lets us find the threads between the different programs, the different services that we provide, the different communities that we work with, and avoid bucketing out work by our organizational structure, which I think we had, it was a pitfall of some past strategic work of ours, so that we can find those threads and think very broadly about how everything we do affects issues and communities. So I'll have a more robust update for y'all next time. We're just starting that work, and the plan should be done at midsummer. There are several things in our 21-23 governor's budget that'll support that work. We have a couple policy option packages that are directly going to support our EJ efforts. One is we are proposing 6 positions to be permanent. We're doing that with existing service levels funding, so it's not going to cost anything, but it's going to create capacity in multiple agency areas, particularly around community involvement, community engagement, rulemaking efforts for us to begin to take a look at everything that we do that touches communities, and be really thoughtful across programs about how we approach that work. We are very excited about hopefully the legislature agreeing with us that these positions are necessary in the long term and that they should be permanent, especially because there's no price tag attached. So fingers crossed. We also have support for a grant program that the agency has that is puts money into the communities to do waterway health and safety work. That's a $200,000 submerged land enhancement fund, with the emphasis on local communities being able to propose projects that have direct, immediate impacts on improving health and safety. So like past projects have included a marine debris cleanup along the lower Columbia, invasive weed removals at Willamette Mission State Park, a new dock in Coquille, that was critical for public access to recreation there. So we are hoping to get support for that package as well. And then we're also continuing the Portland Harbor Superfund cleanup work. We've got a couple very large $6 million, $7 million packages where the state's lead on that. And it includes the ongoing collaboration with federal, state, local partners to make the investments in everything that we need to do to support that cleanup. And our budget presentation, it's next Monday, the 29th, and then with public comment, I think on the 31st. So that's coming right up. Everything else here, I think I will put in my written report. I just do want to let you know the Elliott State Research Forest, which is something DSL has been working collaboratively on with Oregon State University. The land board in December affirmed the Elliott's future as a research forest, and highlighted a few things that we need to work on with OSU to ensure mostly continued public accountability for all the things that the research forest has great potential to do for Oregon, but the land board was very clear that they wanted to make sure that OSU is going to be able to live up to those commitments. So that is continuing. We've got a 2-year plan for finalizing that work with OSU, with extensive public engagement. The most immediate thing that's coming up is in May. DSL is going to be taking out a draft habitat conservation plan for public comment and review. We'll be doing extensive engagement around that. And that's ahead of our submission of that document to federal agencies, which also includes a second public involvement opportunity. And that is it for me. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. All right, thank you all.
But wait.
Oh, wait.
Oh no.
I won't go
got
yet.
a couple questions.
All right.
The first one is on House Bill 2488, having climate justice as a planning goal. What's been going on there with that?
I am going to have to get back to you on that. I didn't get a legislative update before this meeting, so.
Let's send that around to everyone. And another thing that I would really want to know more about is that Superfund engagement. I've worked with that community group for over a decade with Cassie Cohen, and
Great.
on the state's engagement with that cleanup. And there's been a lot of community interest for many years. A lot of local, state, and federal representatives are interested in that. And so I just would like to see the community involvement plan in terms of the state's engagement as part of that Superfund site. And we don't need to discuss all that here, but I would appreciate the legislative update for the group and the Superfund state community involvement plan, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'll put that in my written follow-up as well.
Vice Chair, may I make a suggestion about that aspect? I think it's been a while since hearing about the Superfund project, and that might be an interesting topic for the next EJTF meeting, so we can take time to answer questions about that. If Allie and the team at State Lands is down for that.
Absolutely. We will plan on doing that whenever you all like.
Great. Thanks so much, Allie. Appreciate it. Okay. Let's do our last update real quick. David could close us out.
I'm happy to. Thanks for the time, and I will move quickly here in light of you have a guest speaker. But hi, David Morrissey from ODOT, based in our Office of Civil Rights, where I manage our Title VI of the Civil Rights Act program, our Americans with Disabilities Act program, and our Environmental Justice program. And I serve as ODOT's citizen advocate liaison to the task force. Great to see many of you again and to meet some of you for the first time. I'm going to echo Valentine that ice cream is my favorite dessert, and in particular, butter pecan is the best. Let's see. So I think as I've shared with you before, I've been in my role for just about 20 months, so still a little new myself. And my arrival to ODOT in the summer of 2019 was quickly followed by a reorganization of the agency and the hiring of Chris Strickler to serve as the agency's director. He announced that reorganization in autumn 2019, creating a division of social equity. And so for the practical purposes of that reorg, the Office of Civil Rights now reports to the Assistant Director for Social Equity, Nakatris Perkins, who joined the agency in early 2020. You may have had a chance to see her speak or engage with her through other forums. I know she's engaging in an interagency way with colleagues across the state. Part of her program development goal set, which is very large, a lot of issues she's taking on includes hiring an equity manager into ODOT who will be within her division and be able to really focus on sort of the programmatic side of our equity framework, which is a part of our new ODOT strategic action plan. That information is available on our website and always available to provide you more info. And that's an evolving concept as well. But the foundation documents are there, and now we're working at the unit or division level, looking at how we make that live and breathe on a living guiding document. Part of our organization also has included the creation of an ODOT Office of Climate. And so with this moment of reorganization and new projects starting up, and certainly recognizing the volume of activity around some of our largest projects, particularly in Region 1, the Portland area, such as the Rose Quarter, Albina District, the I-205 project, the exploration of tolling. All of these large initiatives have an equity framework and an environmental justice framework. And so working with our project staffs who really are most local, really where these projects are occurring, because they can be in touch with the community. My role in the Office of Civil Rights, based out of Salem, is really a technical assistance and guidance and compliance role, engaging with them and helping make sure that we're building as much vertical integration as possible with the values of equity and environmental justice being present in our project planning from the earliest stages. And one of the most probably visible or active ways you will see that is through citizen advisory functions and engaging of our stakeholders who are most impacted at the local level by these prospective projects. So continuing to interact and work with our interagency or our colleagues in the different regions. I hope we'll get even richer this year because we'll be able to travel and post-COVID environment be a little more shoulder to shoulder and at the same table rather than just through cameras. That said, to be making the most initiative that we can in the current environment, working with the Division on Social Equity, as well as my colleagues and then within the agency at large, we're really doing some, I'll say, mapping and function mapping of ODOT's EJ and equity functions to make sure we're aware what the right hand and the left hand are doing in this very large agency that spans the whole state. And so I really see great increasing connectivity, technical assistance, and fostering of our competencies as a part of ODOT's value of excellence and equity. To that end, let's see, we will have, I think, a great report for you all this year. When you have given us the guidance that you need a written report, we're already beginning our data analysis piece on that. And certainly any questions you want to put on the table today or after we adjourn to me directly, I welcome, because your questions will help guide us, provide you the best report we can. The information that's of interest to you is what we want to make sure we're applying attention to. And finally, I'll close and say that we are, of course, monitoring a variety of the bills that are moving through the legislature with our Legislative Affairs Division, and so have completed a variety of legislative analyses of how things like SB 286 would impact ODOT's implementation of our environmental justice program. So let me stop there with that pretty high level and quick summary. See if you have questions or comments now, or again, I'm always happy and available to you offline. Thanks.
Sure. So I'll be brief because I think it's actually future conversation. So again, I'll reiterate that I'm super excited to hear agency after agency talking about kind of equity and inclusion plans and social justice kind of movement. I really am going to be interested in like, how is this being coordinated? So I'm super excited and super suspicious at the same time. So that's my full disclaimer, and really want to dive in deeper with agencies and really partner as we have for a long time as EJ Task Force with helping agencies kind of define what that looks like as these positions hopefully are funded. So that's not really a question for you, David, but a future conversation. I am interested. I don't think it's a question for today. Really around, and particularly around the gross quarter as a primary example. You know, we've talked a lot about whether it's diesel particulate matter, whether it's other kind of air toxics. And I'd just be curious about kind of how that analysis is happening, what the data is looking like, and certainly what the community engagement is, because, you know, that part of our community, you know, Harriet Tubman School is right there. I mean, there's a lot of direct impacts, and families that we know are impacted by that part of the region, and of course all the other complexities around congestion and freight travel and all the stuff that you all have to deal with. So I guess that's a long way of saying I'd love to get that on the agenda, or it would be great if you could send a written follow-up, which is any materials that you think would be helpful for us to be able to evaluate and look at more deeply. Thanks for that.
Happy to, Ben. Thank you for that guidance, and that is exactly what I need to hear in terms of how we're preparing materials for you. And I think we could even, after getting sort of our foundation on the page for you, then have a guest speaker directly from that program who's engaged in the EJ implementation, and I'll join them, and we can have a good upcoming session with you all this year.
So much, David. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, it is 11:30. Want to make sure Nargess has enough time to present to us today. Good to see you, Nargess. Go ahead and take it away.
Hello, as far as controlling this thing, I guess, Amira, you're gonna click or am I gonna? Okay,
I'll
so.
go ahead and click for you. Just say next slide when you're ready.
Oh, okay, very good. So I'm Nargess Shadbeh. I work at the Oregon Law Center. I have been practicing law on behalf of farm workers for nearly 35 years in Oregon, always with legal aid and the Oregon Law Center. I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about some issues of concerns about on farm workers and particularly with COVID, but probably larger than that with respect to the labor housing that seems to come up quite a bit. And our concern, of course, farm workers' concerns related to us is that it seems that we bring this up, work around the edges, but haven't really focused in a way that we as a state could offer housing that is respectful, frankly, of farm workers who are the backbone of a large industry in Oregon and brings it up to date. So that's, I hope that in the few minutes that I have, I can touch on that. So just, I know we've talked about these issues before, but I've, anyway, wanted to share more with you. And thus the title, Wait Again. It seems as though farm workers and we as their advocates have heard this line quite a bit. It's not the right time, or it's challenging. You have to wait again. You know, we've done what we can now. And frankly, it's enough because it's adversely affecting the health and safety of farm workers. So next slide, please. So the overview is, I want to briefly talk about labor housing in Oregon and the agencies involved. I want to briefly touch on the efforts to put in regulations that for improvement of or reduction of risk COVID-19 over the past year. Then the effort that is going on right now, and they are taking comments up through, I think, April 16th, the Oregon OSHA's permanent COVID-19 regulations, I guess, until COVID goes away. And then the central question, as I mentioned, is, you know, we think that this is an environmental and racial justice issue, given the demographics of the farm workers and just the length of time that we have been struggling, farm workers have been struggling with these same issues. So next slide, please. So probably most of you are familiar with this, but just in case, there are about 328 registered labor housing sites. When I checked on OSHA's site, they register the labor housing with OSHA, and the occupants that could be housed at these sites are up to 9,000. The growers and employers basically send something about how many people could be housed at the site given the standards. So it's up to about 9,000. So I just want to emphasize that because often people think it's just a few labor housing, and it is quite a bit. And that's where a lot of the hand harvest workers that come to Oregon during the height of the season live in rural areas in Oregon. Oregon OSHA, as you know, is a state plan. It makes and enforces the provisions that cover agricultural labor housing, but it has to be as effective as the federal. Now, one thing that I think is important for your work is that OSHA is, although principally involved and focused and responsible for this work, there are many other agencies that take part in that effort. And frankly, one issue that I have seen over the years is the amount of involvement or coordination in a timely way, in a thoughtful way, once and for all. I'm sure there's a lot of coordination that goes behind the scenes that I'm not privy to. But it is that when we ask questions, particularly if it has to go to infrastructure, often it's, I don't know, it's the other person's jurisdiction, et cetera, et cetera. And I accept that not a single agency can do everything. But if you are registering and regulating housing for farm workers for now, 50 years plus, shouldn't there be more coordination, involvement, input in a timely way to lift the standards and determine at least what are the barriers that are blocking us from offering better housing, frankly? And so, for example, the state building codes and plumbing, electrical applies. But when I talk to them, they say, well, it's true that it applies. But for example, what is the PSI could be a range between 15 and 80. But if OSHA chooses to put it at 15, then that's what they are going to be looking at for, that's in compliance. But who is looking at if you're housing people for 10 people in the winter, but then it goes up to 45? Who is watching to see that housing then can, in fact, adequately supply volume, pressure, etc., water access for workers? And this is an ongoing problem. And I've been concerned about it. We have been concerned about it, given the hygiene need of workers at these sites. Next, please. So I guess this is an employer labor housing. The dots present where the labor housings are situated. A lot of them are in the gorge, in this case, Wasco County, but there are plenty in Hood River and various other counties that I don't have pictures of, but those dots represent where the housing is located. I think we skipped the slide. If we could go back one. Yeah, so this briefly, this is the kind of issues that are outdated in the labor housing standards. These are just the regular times. These are the normal times. This is what the farm workers have a right to expect currently, putting aside COVID for a minute. But this is what the regular is. It's like, okay, we think it's inadequate square footage when you've got one person for 40 square feet for bunk beds, 1 to 50 if there's a bed, and 1 to 100 if there's cooking inside. Particularly troubling is the 1 to 40. And another issue is the access to water, meaning, inadequacy of availability of washing machines, dryer, tub. The ratio is abysmal. This is 1 to 30. That is one washing machine or a tub for 30 people. There's inadequacy number of toilets and showers and sinks. There were some adjustments in 2008, but they're still vastly inadequate. There's no requirement for indoor plumbing within living and sleeping areas. And so often people think, well, it's a unit, it's an apartment, it's a cottage. No, a lot of these places is where you have your beds and maybe there's a table. There's hardly any room for a closet. So people store their stuff under the bed, over the bed. And that's it. You walk out, then there is the outside where people park their cars. And then over the other side may be some row of sinks. Then there could be some portable toilets. There could be a kitchen outside that people share. Not every one of them is like that, but a lot of them are just like I described. There's no cooling system. And the requirement is basically that there is insulation. There's no insulation a requirement that I know of, other than that the structure has to protect the individuals from the elements. Next slide. So who's living at the labor housing? And when I was talking about racial justice, ethnicity, diversity, look, probably 98% of people who live at the labor housing speak Spanish or one of the indigenous languages. They have elementary level education. I'm generalizing. There are smattering of people who have high school education, maybe college, but that's very, very rare. The children may speak English fluently, but the parents often don't, and they have receiving information in written form is difficult. There's hardly any access to computer, laptop, internet, although people do have access to their cell phones if it works. And one issue that I want to emphasize to policymakers here is, look, when we're thinking about public health and where people go to give testing, to give vaccination, frankly, there's been a lot of emphasis as to where guest workers live at these labor housing. But of the 328 housing in Oregon, not every one of them is occupied by H-2A workers, where there's been a lot of focus. Probably less than a third of them are like that. But what about focus on the ones that do not receive H-2A workers? And that will be more relevant probably as we go through this. Next slide, please. I know that this is a controversial thing that I will say, but I'm going to say it because from my perspective, what I see in the field, it's the truth. Farm workers are provided housing, and it's true that now, after we had a Ninth Circuit decision that says you don't get a charge for that housing because whose benefit it is whose private benefit it is. It's less for the workers, more for the employers, because we couldn't get workers to be available at the sites in these rural places because of scarcity of housing, because if it is expensive otherwise, because they need them at particular times, etc. So it is wonderful that they provide the housing. It is wonderful that they no longer charge for the rent for the most part. But let's face it, it isn't just being benevolent to the farm workers in this state that growers and industry provide housing. They need to have the workers at dawn. They need to have the workers till dusk. Sometimes they need to have them be available in the middle of the night. And so the housing is provided, I think, partly it's because of a familial relationship between a grower or some workers who have been there for a long time, but it's a business decision. It is a business decision that provides ready, available workers who are not able to work elsewhere if they live at that site. And I have seen many situations where the workers, for whatever reason, can't work one day or 2 days, or a child is sick, and there's some issues. And sometimes growers in site are understanding and work people, but many times you're out. You refuse to work for a particular time, you're out. And the eviction process is pretty summary. There's an argument under the Landlord-Tenant Act that basically is often used is 24-hour notice. And though people are supposed to go to FED court, you tell a farm worker you're out of here, they're going to be out within less than 24 hours. And I have seen women with children packed up into the car and sent out 12 at 12 at night in the gorge because the husband left to go work elsewhere and her work wasn't good enough. Next slide, please. So with respect to sort of shifting gears a little bit here, March of last year, worker advocates like myself and our organization went to OSHA and said, look, given the background on what we know about housing, let's do something fairly quick about reducing risk in the places because of the square footage, because of the density, because this could be airborne. Remember, it wasn't clear to everybody whether it was airborne, it was droplets, it was this. And we frankly went to top-notch experts that we could find because we didn't want to come forward and say, based on emotional outpouring of people like me, do something. We wanted to bring science because we're often, the other side says, we're not basing it on science, we're just being forceful, etc. No, we went and got the top guy in the country, frankly, on infectious disease from Harvard. And he put out a letter, he put out comments. I asked him for a declaration later, and we provided this straight to OSHA. I even asked him to talk to the administrator of OSHA, which Administrator OSHA gracefully agreed. He offered to talk to Oregon Health Authority, and nobody picked him up. And if we had picked him up, we would have been focused on, look, this could be airborne. It's not just a droplet. The 6-foot thing is just a 15-minute duration. It's not supposed to be the keystone. You got to reduce density. The tarps are not going to work. And frankly, I didn't get anywhere. I have worked with the administrator of OSHA for a long time, and I respect him. But whatever decisions were made behind the scenes, they stuck to 6 feet or tarps. And that resulted in people being closer than I think was safe, and putting up tarps that end result was it wasn't protective. There was field sanitation improvement of from 1 to 20 to 1 to 10, but that lasted only through October. And with the executive order of governor, that portion in the field didn't continue. I know I'm running out of time here, so I want to just say, with respect to the housing, the governor's office and others helped quite a bit in bringing in $16 million available to the growers of this state that was managed through, I think, one other agency and Oregon Department of Agriculture. And I've tried with my colleagues to try to figure out how is that money spent. And what we have figured out is, even though there was money available to the tune of $10 million to put workers in alternative housing sites, a fraction of that was used, I think $183,000 or somewhere around $200,000. The rest of the money was used for field sanitation, for rental of toilets. The next slide, please. Currently, there's a proposal on the table. I don't know if it's appropriate for your group to review or comment, but to get to the heart of the matter, the new provisions, I think, are an improvement over last year. You got to give credit where credit is due. What the central issue that's a problem is that it gives a false choice to the growers and camp operators. Again, we as farm worker advocates consulted with ventilation people, with folks at Harvard, and got the best information possible. And they said, look, given the situation, they don't have the ability to open the windows all the time because of pesticides outside, because it's too hot, because it's too cold, because it's the drift. So what you got to do is ask them to put in air purifiers, just simple air purifiers in the rooms where there is, people given the square footage. But you also have to have people who are in those rooms reduce the density so you don't have an expectation that you have 6 people in a room for 240 square feet. I don't think the industry likes that. So what the industry has asked for, and what the proposal now says, is OSHA is requiring or proposing to require air purifier. But now the measurement is from center of the bed to the other center of the bed, instead of 6 feet apart, minimum of 6 feet apart between the beds. The center of the bed in a bunk bed situation then reduces that space of 6 feet even further. I know that CDC just said kids can go back to school and stay 3 feet apart. but they have masks on. Who's going to sleep in their mask in the labor housing? I don't think people are going to sleep in their masks. So the choice of either do ventilation and did you get reduced distance, or you get the 6 feet distance, but then no air purifiers. That's got to go. Put the package together and tell people, look, it's a business decision. You're providing housing for workers. You need the workers. Offer them the full package or figure out why you can't. Next slide. I want to show you the next slide. Skip that one. This is from Eva Galvez. She's a family physician at Virginia Garcia. For over 10 years, she has worked or more providing services. I have done outreach in the field with her. So has other people who are on this panel. And she told me, look, Nargess, with regard to the testing, because the growers say, look, you're full of hot air, because where is the information that shows that there were outbreaks in the labor housing? Where is the information about the testing number? Well, that's convenient, because you know what? We didn't keep records like that. And her information to me, with her allowance for me to put her name on this, to a letter that we have sent to some of the agencies here, is look, last season, they tested people, but there were many workers at many sites. And she's told me that some growers said there's no more need here. Same thing in the gorge with one community health, where they said there's no need here, or we don't need the testing here. And so the workers pick up on that. So they don't test at the sites. And then we put testing at parks, etc., which is wonderful. But how did we keep track of that? The form on itself doesn't say what's your job. It doesn't. Nobody is looking at, are they putting down the domicile or are they putting out the labor housing site? I bet you anything they didn't put, I work at X site or I live at. So they gave the address wherever they were from. So what does that do to our data? Garbage in, garbage out. No problems at the testing issues for farm workers at the labor housing. It's magic. Next slide. So honestly, we have so many exclusions and exemptions. People are more exempted and excluded than they're covered when it comes to workers' rights. And I'm pleading for a change and improvement for farm workers in labor housing. I think that we have failed them. And we have tried many different ways to get attention. Next slide. And so this is what I'm asking. I was going to take you through the number of times that we have asked for different improvements. Next slide. OSHA put in that if you provide cooking facilities in 2008, you have to have 100 square feet. Instead of providing 100 square feet, they give them 10 years to improve. And many sites, what do? They've shoved the stoves out. There, done. So what does this do when you've got a stove outside and you got the field next to you within 30 feet and you spray that field? What about drift? What about wind? What about smoke? What about heat? Next slide. Currently, you're aware that the governor has mandated rulemaking for OHA and OSHA. I reached out ahead of time to OSHA and to others that are heading this to ask and plead, please include labor housing at this, because the workplace is, frankly, the workplace is within an arm's reach. And they're living there as a condition of their work. And my feedback was, no, excluded is specifically now, so that this effort that we're on this summer, when we are going to be attending 9-10 meetings talking about outdoor smoke and heat and how to protect workers, outdoor workers, and great for that effort. But farm workers living at labor housing, Indoor, outdoor, the way I showed it to you, are going to be specifically excluded. Now, I'm assured, and every time I have been assured as a representative of farm workers, that this is a challenging issue, that we have to wait and they will pick up labor housing rules, look at it comprehensively. You know, I wish I believed that that was true, but it's happened so many times that I don't believe that it will happen for probably another year plus. Farm workers can't afford that. You know, we walk around and talk about life expectancies of farm workers is 49. Next slide. And this is the stove view, and this is why heat is important. You walk into that room, that's where you sleep. You come out, is where you cook. You sit out here, is where you live to eat, etc. And it is hot. It is hot, and that's why they have those tarps up there, you know, to protect themselves, have a little bit of shade when they get home. Next slide. Same operation, but you see what the whole length of this, and this is not the worst of the housing. This is a huge operator. Next slide. And this is a solution that the workers came up with. Doesn't that look good? Here's a fan hanging up to cool you, the same socket up there. And then the other thing that the workers do is they buy $200, you know, in window thing, and then they bring it up and then they put it in the windows with the cardboard around, and you have a row of those put in, you know, not very professional way, which is a problem when you've got drift possibility. And next slide. So we're asking, when is it at the right time to do this so that you have adequate sanitation possibility at labor housing, that you have regulations, that there are setbacks from where the housing is and where the field starts, where they spray. Next slide.
Sorry, Nargess, real quick. Task force members, would y'all be okay with extending our meeting another 10 minutes or so? So we can have Nargess have another 5, and then we can do 5 Q&A.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm hurrying. This is a view that is not atypical of where workers are, you know, drying. But, you know, it could be nostalgic if you were on a picnic or a summer thing, but this is what people live. This is where their children live. This is where you were assigned, you know, to go. And you don't, it's not like you have a living room or cooling off places that you open that door, that's where you live. You come out, you do your cooking. Now you have one wash tub to do your wash. There's apparently inadequate line, or this is where the workers decided to hang up their clothes to dry. And I can't vouch whether that tree has been sprayed at some point or not, but I'm told that they don't leave trees unsprayed because it can transfer into the others. Next slide. So workers say, look, this is a big problem. We go to take a shower because the worker protection standards say, take a shower, clean up immediately when you get home, don't touch your children. Okay, let's assume people have access. But then if you go in and turn on the shower, they say, look, we got shampoo in my hair and another compañero is running the tub or the laundry. And so my water stops. And so in order not to create a lot of tension in the labor housing, because I asked, there's one washing machine, why are you guys packing this stuff and going into town, $20 a shop? And they said, it creates too much tension. It gets too much tension between the families, between the workers. So the heck with it. We'll just pack it up and go into town where they then have to haul the kids, where they have to buy fast food, plus put in the operating thing. Now, in the middle of COVID, is this a smart thing to do? So when we ask for, adequate ratios, we're told that this is a challenging issue. Why? Perhaps because of the infrastructure, because the housing that was put in place is outdated for the need now. And so, next slide. What we're saying is, look, we can go to the next slide. I want to acknowledge that when we have approached OSHA, they have said, these are challenging issues, they're real issues, and we will do something about it. My concern personally here is that there's been so many waiting, and it's a challenging issue, and you have to wait, or you all have to wait, is that we as Oregon, whether it's policymakers, advocates, industry, are losing face with farm workers who we want to attract to work in this state and keep things afloat so that Oregon can compete with other places in bringing out its fantastic, fruit crops. The workers tell us point blank, well, why should I come here? They pay more there. They have better, benefits for us. And so a lot of the workers, frankly, are coming here, the domestic workers from California, from Washington, out of loyalty to sites where they have worked for umpteen years. They mean this. But how long are we going to be able to count on that as Oregon if we don't, come on, do something about the housing where people are spending not just 2 or 3 weeks, they're spending months at these sites. And so my ask is, look, you want to do labor housing? Call the labor housing committee or group or whoever you have as advisory together and think about things now. Do we always have to wait for a crisis? Let's do it after COVID. When will that be? So, and come prepared. Why don't the agencies have information about what is the configuration of the housing that I am registering for 30 plus years? Oregon OSHA doesn't have that, and they admit it. They don't know what the configuration of the housing is. And multiple times we have told them, you have registration information that you send out. Every year people have to send in. On that registration information, say, what's the configuration of the housing? When has the housing been built? We don't have that information. Well, why don't you have that information? Because it could be applicable to what code applies when. At least you have an idea of what is the stock of housing that you are dealing with. So when you have a crisis, you know what measures to put in order to safeguard better, more efficiently for the workers. Same thing goes for wells, for the plumbing, the electrical, everything that we consider for improvement goes back to the infrastructure. And we have poor data about the infrastructure at these sites as a state. We don't know. I may be completely wrong on this, and I sure would like to be corrected, because I think part of the reason that we're not able to make headway and we just have these Band-Aids every few years is because we haven't taken this challenge and, done proper work to prepare for multi-agency focus on what is it that we're offering farm workers and can we do it better? I know that you're going to do vaccinations. I'm talking about OHA. And my hope is that the vaccination availability goes a lot better than the testing. Next slide, please. I just say this and then I'll be quiet. Because workers are safe at the labor housing. They don't have, how do I say it? At the park, there may be outside forces that will bother the workers and the people who are doing vaccination. At the labor housing, that's where they live. That's when they're not working. That's where the occupants could also be vaccinated. That's where we should consider including, aside from, other outlets. Farm workers are going to have a hard time going to the pharmacies to line up for this. Most people don't have internet on their laptops to sign up. And it is not just the H2A sites that need to be visited. It's all of them. And honestly, I think that there should be a tutorial about the access laws in Oregon. People live at the site, that is their housing. And I think that we're way reluctant in reminding our friends, the growers or labor contractors, look, people live here, this is their housing, and people like OHA or health providers have their authorized person. They can have in and out of that area, and collaboration is good, but when it comes to worker health and safety, come on. That's where you have the best access to the workers, and that's where you can provide the information.
Thank you, Nargis.
Okay.
Hey gang, it's 12:08. So real quick in the 2 minutes we have left, if folks want to provide any quick comments, then we'll close out. And I'm hoping that tomorrow morning when we do our welcome and introductions, we can discuss this a little bit more. But I know we're over time, and I want to make sure folks get to the rest of their day. But thank you so much, Nargis, for coming and presenting to us. So yeah, real quick, gang, if anyone has any quick comments they'd like to make, and then we can pick it up again in the morning.
There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to add. And as someone who has been visiting housing labor camps since 2002, these stories are real. Every summer we go out and speak with farm workers, their family members, who hear the same concerns. In 2019, I visited a labor camp out in the Gorge, and there were families sleeping underneath the orchards because they just couldn't go inside the cabins because they were just too hot. Workers would tell us, yes, I'll be going back inside the cabin after 10 p.m. when it cools down. And so all of these stories and the pictures are just so real that I just wanted to, add that to this.
Great. Anyone else?
I want to thank you for the opportunity, and you have to forgive my level of passion when it comes to this. It's just very close to the heart, and I think hopefully you appreciate that.
Thank you, Nargis. Yeah, no, I definitely do. I remember in 2015, when the EJTF, when we organized for farm workers and forest workers to come testify. So, this is something I've been singing for a long time, and then also feel your frustration, Nargis, but there's also a long history of the relationship between farm workers and growers since the implementation of the Bracero program in 1943 and here in the state of Oregon. So this is a decades long problem, and something that we're not going to solve overnight, but appreciate all your advocacy, Nargis and Valentin, and all of their task force members' attention on these issues. So with that, it is 12:11. I think we're going to go ahead and close out, and then we'll pick this conversation up again in the morning. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. See you tomorrow.